I'm very awkward in the live streams, but I'm going to give this a whirl. And we are here to talk about my company, but most of all, we're talking about Affinity, this new project that's going to go live on Kickstarter in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from tomorrow, so March 30th. And if you guys have any comments, post them here, and I will read them. And I will address them. I actually have a bunch of questions people have already asked here. Some sent me personally, some from journalists, and some of them are just from the Kickstarter page itself, and some things I already have. I'm even going to shuffle these up to make sure that they're a little unusual. But first, let's show you guys the campaign. Let's do that. Let's do that. There we go. So here we are. This is the current campaign. And let's see here. Let's making sure everything's solid there. It is. And I got some comments here from people. All of them have been really positive. I'm going to close that off for now and go into it if I see something of interest. And yeah, let's get to it. So the campaign launches on March 30th. Date doesn't have it there, but that's it. This is the preview people can see. We have this little video clip, and then we have this wonderful little campaign page. We'll go through these really, really quickly. Boop. And a couple shout outs. Mark Muir didn't do the narration for this video. It's not because he said no. I did not ask him. And the reason why I did not ask him is because he is super, super, super busy and super, super, super nice. And I don't like taking advantage of his amazing generosity. He is one of my closest friends. And I imagine he's a little busy right now with a certain BioWare project, so I didn't want to bother him. So instead, we got a guy named John Fink. John Fink is a friend of mine. I met him through the Garmy, and for those people who don't know what that is, that's Ralph Garman's podcast. I am a 4-star general. He is a 4-star general, so we met through there. He offered his services, and he was magnifique. Absolutely love what he was able to accomplish. And let's see here. Let's see here, and let's see, and if we click it, you can actually hear it.
Amethyst.
Yeah. So, oh, I better move this a bit closer so you can actually hear me. Now, we don't actually have a lot of digital elements. I won't go through all of that. The other person I want to shout out really quickly here is Leah Coughlin, who did all of these. Like people who saw the original Ultramodern campaign, it was pretty rudimentary because I built it myself with my limited assets and some help with Nick. And this time, Leah built these pages. And she also did the Naramata page, which also looks fantastic. So I'm really, really happy with what she was able to do. And this campaign, for those people who don't know, was part of the original Ultramodern campaign in 2019. It was the last unlockable. It was meant to be a trio of 3 projects. A trio of 3 should be 9 projects. A trio. It's 3 books of interconnected campaign worlds. It was meant to be about 100 pages long each. When I wrote the first one, it came out to be 170. So I said, okay, so that one's going to be the long one. The other 2 will probably be shorter. Then I wrote Conestoga, and it was 200 pages. I said, okay, that one's the long one. The other one should be 170. So then I wrote Taurus, and it got to 210 pages. And so I realized I had to go back to Paradise and extend that one. And I realized this is not going to be the project I was planning on. It had a certain budget for black and white artwork, and I realized that there was no chance we were going to be able to really create the project I wanted to with that predetermined budget. And a lot of people are posting. And I realized we needed to build up. So that's the reason why we're moving on to Kickstarter in order to sorry about that, to address these issues. Now, the black and white's still coming. There's one thing I've said. People said, I don't want to back a campaign that's going to happen anyway. And yeah, the monochrome version is going to happen regardless of what people say, regardless of what this campaign goes to. This campaign is to fund additional artwork for the black and white and also fund the color version. If this thing does not fund, the black and white will still happen. It'll have its limited budget as it was originally conceived. It will be larger because I said I wrote quite a bit of content, but it's still going to not be as good as I really wish it could be. So that's what the Kickstarter is for. And unlike other companies where it's like the Kickstarter is meant just to be a pre-order service, this is not a pre-order service. This is funding the project. That's how it was with Ultramodern. Ultramodern was an update. It blew through a stretch goal, so it got to be exactly what I wanted it to be, not any less. I was very, very happy for that to happen. So we'll go through it. Thank you, Bo, for your little comment. Man, I'm so excited to sink my teeth into. That's cool. We'll show that one. Yeah. Million Conestoga, I need that looter shooter gear crafting system. Oh yeah, that one was crazy. We'll talk about it in a second. So I'm gonna shuffle some of these comments up and go through it. So first question I have here is, yes, I actually wrote it like this. Can I upgrade one book? And the answer is no. So for those people who did pay for Affinity back in 2019 as part of Amethyst, part of Ultramodern, we had about 200 people upgrade. So those are the people who are eligible, and we'll go into the eligibility when that question pops up. Of the people that just bought one of the Affinity books, that was 2 people. 2 people bought just one single book of Affinity. Everyone else bought all 3, which is cool. It does show you that people have faith in the whole project. The problem is that I'm not going to create potentially 6 new upgrade pledge levels just for those 2 people. It was just not feasible. So it was just not going to happen. So I do apologize for those 2 people. If they want to have that project put towards I have allergies. I don't have COVID. Then what they should do is reach out to me. I can refund them the money of that one purchase, and then they can just start the pledge anew. They will not be able to buy the other 2 books and get the upgrade. That's just too much more work. I'd have to reactivate the Ultramodern CrowdOx, and that's just way too complicated. So that's the reason why people cannot upgrade one book. You either upgrade all of them if you bought all of them, or you buy the project anew. So we don't have pledge levels. We already have enough pledge levels offered, which we'll go into. In fact, we'll show it here. We can see that you can get a monochrome single. This is not an upgrade. You can get a monochrome. This is the upgrade version. This is if you want to. I wish these were bundled the way they're bundled on this page, keeping all the upgrades in one, but it doesn't. It always stacks them in order of price. So this is the monochrome single digital. This is the upgrade for the people to color. So if you bought Affinity from 2019, you bought all 3 books, and you wanted just to get the digital color, this is your pledge level. $13, you get the color upgrade. The next one here is a single color digital. This is the monochrome, and this is the color. So you just want one color version of Affinity. I seriously don't think people should get these single purchases, but I'm there because there are some people that may want them. This is the 3-pack. These are the beginnings of the good pledges, I think. Well, this one's obviously not too bad. This one here, which is $31, and this is all 3 books from Monochrome. Once again, I actually think most people will go with the color pack. It's not that much more expensive, and I think it's going to be worthwhile. And that's just right here, the digital color pack. This is the digital version. As you might have noticed, I'm throwing in the black and whites as well because why not? There's no difference in content between the 2. They'll all be mechanically the same. So maybe you want to have the PDF in color and then print the monochrome, right? I can totally see people doing that. So that's the reason why we did this. This is another single, so you can order one of the hardcover books. Won't be in a slipcase, obviously. Once again, like the single PDFs, I really don't suggest people go for this one because. And we'll go into details why. If you say, I don't want fantasy, I want hard sci-fi, I just want Conestoga. Or I want steampunk, I don't want the mecha rules, I just want Taurus. That's fine. But like I said, there's so much more value in creating and reading the entire experience. There's just so much more value. There's nothing more mechanically, unless you want the mechanics from the other two books. It's just the joy of reading these books. I've actually said to a few people, it's actually one of the comments, that I actually think role-playing games, I know a lot of people, actually most people I know have role-playing games that they have read, enjoyed, and never played. I have tons of role-playing games that I've read and never played. I just picked up, which is going to be another video coming up, a signed limited edition of the Alien RPG. I'll go into details in that video why that's so special to me. And I may never play it, but the point is to enjoy the experience. Is there artistic and narrative value in reading a role-playing game? And I think there is. You can put so much more detail in lore building. You can still have potentially narratives, and there is some desire in seeing this cohesive, complete rule. So that's the reason why I think the single prints are not my suggestion. This is the upgrade. This is for people who backed Affinity back in 2019, all 3 books. Like I said, 200 people are eligible for this, and we'll go into details on that question. This is the complete set. This is what I recommend for everybody else. This is what everybody else should do. This is the 3 hardcover box set, then of course the 3 color, and then the 3 monochrome, and then also an art portfolio. I do that for all my projects. So you get all the artwork in a complete directory. People who have backed previous campaigns know how these are. These are massive, sometimes hundreds of megabytes in size of every illustration in Photoshop and format, JPEG, PNG, all the RAWs, all the sketches. It's massive. This is the retail pledge. This is designed for obviously retailers. It's only 3 books because you're getting, 3 units because you're getting 3 box sets. As a retailer, you cannot buy individual books. You have to get the 3 hardcover set. I am not going to create a situation where you can buy individual books and sell them. So that's why it's only 3 to keep the cost down. And so that's the system. So that's basically that system. Now we'll go back to the questions here really quickly. Oh, am I eligible for the upgrade? Okay. So like I said, I have access to the CrowdOx. So I know everybody's username and email from Kickstarter, and I know exactly what their purchase was, whether or not they got Affinity as part of the original pledge. Like if you got the complete ultramodern experience or the very personal ultramodern experience, you get those automatically. Or if you paid for it post-campaign in the Kickstarter itself. So I know that. There's about 200 people. If it was like 800, it might be a bit difficult, but 200 is enough for me to pull up people's names, and I know exactly. So every single person that pledges for the upgrade, I can go and grab your email, or grab your username, go into CrowdOx and say, does this person support it? Now, for those people, because it's been 2 years, that have changed their username or changed their account, I will reach, if someone pledges and it's not a profile that matches CrowdOx, I will reach out to you and say, I don't have you on my list. You will need to provide your original account ID or your original email that I can look up. If you cannot do so, this pledge will not be fulfilled. And that's true. And I know there's gonna be somebody who's like, oh, I'll just get the upgrade. Maybe I'll get away with it. I know who you are. If it follows through, you will not get your game. So that's not necessarily, I'm not trying to be aggressive. That's simply the solid fact. That's just how it's going to be. And I know some people that plan on pledging for the full version anyway and not getting the upgrade, and that's entirely their prerogative. And, if they want to support the project, but that upgrade is there for those 200 and some people, including if we get to a certain stretch goal, there may be other options for even a better reward for those people. So that's so like I said, 200 people, we use CrowdOx to verify. So if you're concerned, don't worry. If you pledge that level, I can find out. And if you're not one, if I can't find a match, I will reach out to you. Like I said, if it was 800 people, I probably wouldn't do it, but it's 200 people. So that's within the means. I got nothing else to do during that time anyway. Okay, next question. What was the inspiration? And what was the inspiration for each book? So there's inspiration for what inspired the project, and then the inspiration for each book. Now, I don't really know exactly how it was. I know I wanted them to be, like, the idea that there being a different mix of magic and technology came later, but I did, I created, okay, I'll stop that for a second with the question. Let's see here. Lead by buying Affinity stock, and barrel shows respect to yourself and the creative effort put into the project, but that's just my opinion. Yeah, well, thank you. But like I said, there's not much. I'm still making money off of the upgrade anyway, so I don't feel too bad if you do go for the upgrade. So yeah, so Derek, I will guarantee you, like I said, if you did do that, I can pull up your account and verify. If you're unsure, reach out to me. I'll double check. It's not a hard thing. Like I said, people have actually commented in this section right here asking whether or not they have, and I've done that. And every situation, someone said, I thought I did, you did. So it's a pretty easy thing to do. So going to like what I said, Paradise first. The way this project happened, it started just with the first campaign, Paradise. Although I originally meant it to be a 3 campaign, I only ended up running Paradise because of complexities with my group, which I'll go into in that question. Paradise was designed to be a set in a giant full-scale orrery, a model solar system, a geocentric solar system. This geocentric solar system had a planet in the center and the sun orbited around. It was heavily inspired by Agra's orrery in the Dark Crystal. So those people who are old enough to remember the Dark Crystal, there's this wonderful set of this fantastical constructed solar system. And I thought, hey, wouldn't that be cool if that was full scale? And that's what it went on from there. I found out later that there is a full scale orrery, I think, in the DC universe or in the Marvel universe. It's very obscure. It doesn't really pop up. I think it's mentioned in one comic. I did not know about that. And also mine's a little different. Mine's definitely a fantastical geocentric system. And it was going to be heavy magic with some technology. It was inspired partially by Last Exile, which was an anime. Great anime until the last 3 episodes, but that's going into another topic. But I like the idea of these technologically advanced people presenting themselves as godlike people to these fantasy empires below, and then tweaking the empire as they see fit in this constructed world. So that's where Paradise went off. Conestoga was originally set in a cylindrical spaceship, but it was always a giant colony ship. And I wanted it to be a story with mecha and so forth. The pulling inspiration from other sources to make Conestoga what it was took a bit later. It wasn't until I started writing it. I did have, when I started to sit down in 2019 to plan out the games and really, really write them, I realized what I wanted to inject into Conestoga, and that was I wanted to bring loot and shoot rules, which I played with in Ultramodern 5, but I wanted to tap very specifically games like Destiny, but more importantly, a game called Anthem, which unfortunately Anthem is kind of dead now. I still play Anthem on occasion because I like the mech. I like the Colossus mech. It's so cool in comparison. I play Destiny and I go, I don't feel as unique a snowflake, and I play Anthem and I feel like a unique snowflake, and I love playing Anthem for that uniqueness, for that distinctiveness. And I love the fact that you got to fly. So I brought mechs inspired by that setting into this. I also like the idea that, once again, like Paradise, if Anthem is in a constructed world. There's a whole lore about the fact that the world in Anthem is a half-constructed world. It was being formed, and then something happened, and it stopped halfway, and I think it's ingenious. I don't have that in this format. Conestoga then kept on going. Then I realized the other thing I wanted to play with was the construction system from Dead Space 3. Now, people have decried Dead Space 3. I really like Dead Space 3. Obviously it's not as scary as Dead Space 2 and 1, but gameplay-wise, it's mechanically extremely solid. And if you play with a friend like I did with my friend Chris Bradley, it's incredibly fun, especially when the game screws with one player, not the other, and there's a confusion of what they're encountering. It is priceless. but the weapon construction system is magnifique. I absolutely love the idea. I love the idea of being able to take modules and make guns. And I wanted to do that, and Conestoga was the only place that would fit. So I put that system into Conestoga, not realizing it was going to be 30 pages of just that section. Armor was another 20, and that's when Conestoga ended up being as long as it was. And I said to myself, okay, well, its fluff's going to be smaller, and the fluff in that section is smaller, but that construction system ended up being huge and being the dominating aspect of Conestoga. Taurus, when I originally conceived it, was on a regular world. And I always had the idea of it being somewhat post-apocalyptic and involving that there was ruins of cities and destroyed, ruins everywhere. And the only thing that was left over were these train tracks. And I knew it was going to be steampunk. At some point, I decided to pull it into a Taurus, a donut-shaped world, which is when it changed its name to Taurus. And that's came the idea that, okay, now we're going to start creating the interrelationships between these three. And it ended up being that they were all three constructed worlds, all with different shapes, sphere and cylinder and then donut. And then about a month ago, I decided, you know what? I don't like the cylinder anymore. Let's make it so there's no front or back to this ship in Conestoga. So it turned into two spheres that were connected, or a peanut. And that's how it ended up happening. So, and then Taurus, I just knew Taurus did not have one specific inspiration that I derived from. I knew I wanted to do this new magic system based off playing cards, and I wanted to put in steampunk weapons. Some of the specific steampunk magical enchantments you could apply do have some inspiration. Obviously, when I designed the weapons in Taurus, I went looking for old, weird West, not Weird West settings, but Old West firearms and firearms from the beginning of recorded history. And every single one of them got in here. So we got about 100 or so new firearms. And then creating the inscription system. So there was a reason to have a low-tech weapon because you could add more inscriptions to it. And then a more high-tech weapon would have less inscriptions. Similar to what Amethyst does, but in Amethyst, you can't have any enchantments on a weapon at all. Here, there's a scale. The lower tech the weapon, the more magic you can apply. And we applied some specific things that were inspired. So there's definitely some weapons within Taurus that will seem familiar. Some of the enchantments will be familiar. Like I just watched Tenet. So one of the enchantments is being able to reverse time and pull a bullet you fired from its destination back into the gun and potentially hit someone on the way back. I couldn't resist. I had to do that. So yeah, that was how each one got inspired. So they were developed up until a month ago that we were still evolving the three settings. Thank you, Nigel. And also, yes, I know. Yeah, funnily enough, like I said, I was really annoyed that Anthem got shelved. Pure little secret, I did reach out to EA and ask them whether or not they were interested in doing a 5e game of Anthem. The guy, I was expecting a boilerplate, no, we're not interested. And instead I got, man, that's a really good idea. Let's check and see whether or not we want to keep the IP for now. I was like, okay. And then like a week later, we're like, we're going to hang on to the IP for now, but thanks for the, that's actually a really good idea. And I wasn't expecting them to literally respond to me. So that was really cool. So while I love the book, one issue I had with UM5 Redo is that there were no examples of any mecha being created using the mecha construction system, something I was particularly excited about to use as a reference when building our own. Let's see here. Will there any of these books have some examples of that? To be honest, no. And the weirdness is that technically Affinity doesn't need ultramodern. You really should. It's way more, there's way more freedom in the settings to do that. And I did write them assuming certain classes would exist. But I didn't want the game to say requires ultramodern to play. So you could play Paradise, play it using the fantasy races, use the few tech bits that are presented in the game without having to refer to ultramodern. Same thing with Conestoga, same thing with Taurus. So there's no point where I specifically reference look at Ultramodern 5 for the rules on this system. But like I said, I would never play Affinity without Ultramodern, but I didn't want to make it a mandatory. So yeah, I do move those 1 or 2 pages of new rules over that would require you to play the firearms correctly. But beyond that, no. I did make mecha. The issue is that it took so long to get somebody to make character sheets that I didn't want to present those examples until I actually had a character sheet. And that character sheet only went up yesterday. We finally have new sheets for Ultramodern 5, new sheets for mech construction and so forth. So we finally have that. So I may start transferring those over and posting them. The other reason why that I didn't have examples, Derek, was, and I said this, I was extremely upfront and very honest about this. I said I did not have enough time to fully test this system. So I didn't know whether or not the mechs I would present were 100% balanced. I said, I need people to test this system. I need people to test this system. And I had a couple people read it and they said, here's a few comments. I went back and I did it. But technically something as vastly complicated as the MTS within Ultramodern should have had months of thorough testing. I did not have the opportunity to do that. I posted it and we made a couple changes in the errata, but I've been surprised at how few, no one's ever come out and said, this system is broken, here's why. I think the reason why I think it works is because it's designed to work with itself. And I think the level adjustment mechanic helps create a mecha that's balanced to the party. So yeah, that's the thing I should address. But no, the mecha in Conestoga operate differently than the MTS because the mecha in Conestoga are just power armor. With the MTS and Ultramodern, you should be able to make colossally huge mecha, the size of cities, if you wanted to. That being said, we do have planetary and city scale monsters in Paradise, but we don't have giant mecha in that setting. So that was it. So that was the inspiration for each book. Let's see what else I got here. How many stretch goals are there? Okay, that's a good question. Let's look right now because we can see the stretch goals section. We can scroll down to it. We'll see here that we have a stretch goal every $5,000. So 10,000, we unlock more illustrations. The paper quality upgraded from 60 gram to 70 gram. I really want these to get unlocked because then we can ensure that the final book's quality will be outstanding. 70G is basically the same quality that Ultramodern had, the basic core version. The premium version, which in the deluxe version is 90, and we'll see that is that's another upgrade. In fact, the paper quality upgrades. Actually, we'll go into these in a second. We'll get more illustrations. And then we have the new Daemon race for Paradise, which has been half written, but not 100%. The Underline race, which is the same situation, and the Zodiac race for Taurus. And then we have a bunch of blank ones, which will be unlocked. But the pattern stays. Every $5,000, there's another stretch goal. How many are there? Well, I didn't want to boast that I was going to unlock them all, which I did in Naramata, which I thought was a mistake. So we're not showing all of these to get people, anxious or what have you. So as we move, we will unlock these. But between you and me, it's about $200,000 worth of. So literally all the way to 200,000, we have stretch goals that go all the way there, every 5,000. The paper goals will go all the way to, I think, 110 gram paper, which is way thicker than even what the deluxe version of Ultramodern had. It's going to have, obviously, we'll have color illustrations all the way through those stretch goals. More races, more weapons. Right now, the page count of each of these is between 208 and 211 pages without any artwork. There's some gaps where there should be artwork. And if you see the playthroughs, because there's one of the videos on the page is a fully thorough look through the core files as they are currently built, and you can see there's a lot of gaps where artwork could be. But even if we get all of our artwork, we're looking at 220 pages plus. If we add the extra content, I wouldn't be surprised that if we blow through all of our stretch goals, the final page count for each of these is probably going to be 250 pages each, easy. which takes it to 750 pages of content, which is kind of crazy. There's a final stretch goal, which I don't want to reveal yet, but it's kind of a neat one. It's only available as a add-on upgrade, which means it's the only stretch goal that's not included. And that basically, well, we'll get into that later if we unlock that. So that's the stretch goals. Every 5,000 we have stretch goals. There's a bunch of them that just say illustrations, but there's a bunch that specifically add new mechanics and so forth. One of them adds a set bookmark for the book, but some of them that'll be good for all the digital ones. And then there are ones that are only good for the physical book because it actually increases the physical quality of the book. Spot UV coding, satin bookmark. One of them will be brand new cover illustrations. But yeah, there's actually way more stretch goals than we have on this illustration. So thanks for answering. Yeah, I saw those news sheets. They look great. Anyway, I'd love to someday in the future see a supplement of some kind. Some pre-constructed mecha. Actually, there are 3 projects after Affinity, which I'll go into after this. One's called Amethyst, is Returning to Amethyst, which is something I have a lot of passion for. One is a certainly going to be controversial setting called Heavenfall, which is something that got to me a few weeks ago, and I was very much heavily inspired. And then the third one is an unnamed project, which involve mecha within a desert world. It's inspired partially by a video game that never happened, called Hard Space, and a hardware. It was called Hardware Shipbreakers, and they made a game called Hardware Shipbreakers, which is a different game. The game that was this one involved a world where all these spaceships have crashed. It's kind of a graveyard, kind of what we saw in episode 8 of Star Wars, where they had this big battle and there's starships crashed on this planet. And I like that idea. So the idea is that you would have people scavenging and surviving on this desert world, and to be mecha. And I think, unlike the other games, I probably would make this setting tied to Ultramodern, and so I would pull the mecha rules in there. I would probably refine them and test them, and then narrow them so you're just making mecha that would fit the setting. So you're not making, the Jaegers, for example, because the Jaegers wouldn't be in this setting. Thank you. By the way, Bo's my best man, so you're the best man at my wedding. Thank you, Bo. Yeah, Heavenfall is really neat. I like the idea of Heavenfall, but I know it's going to tick people off. It's not going to go down. I even suspect that I may have to find new collaborators to work on it, because I think it's going to be a setting that's going to upset some people. Next question. How are books related? Making good time? Yeah, we'll probably go along. The books are related in 5 different ways. There's 5 different ways this game is related. This is not necessarily a pleasant thing. So we'll go back to the screen for now. We'll go back to the campaign in a second. So the campaigns are related in 5 different ways. The first one is proper names. Anytime I create a name of something, that name should and generally will pop up somewhere else. It won't necessarily pop up in the same idea. So, for example, if you have a person named, if a person gets mentioned in one setting, that same person will get mentioned in another book, but not necessarily the same person in the same situation. If we have a monster, like for example, the Enderlon is a playable Fae-like race in Conestoga. They are a race of golem-like people in Paradise, and then they're not a playable race in Paradise. So very, they're still a race. They're still a race entry, but they pertain to different people. There are some things that are unique. For example, the train names in Taurus don't pop up anywhere else. because they are most definitely certainly tied to that setting, and they would be jarring in other ones. So the first one are proper names, but more specifically, which is point 2, are the empires. There's this common thread between these 3 settings, is that there are 12 empires in a Cold War, or 12 kingdoms or whatever, and they're different. So there's 12 kingdoms in Paradise, 12 colonies in Conestoga, and 12 city-states in Taurus. And they all have the same name, or same names: Orago, Iridius, Drago, Volani, and so forth. And some of their interrelationships are similar. For example, every single setting has a timeline of 1,500 years, which means their recorded history goes back 1,500 years. So the timelines is printed, start at 0, go to year 1,500, and within the last 50 years, one of these empires got either destroyed, taken over, or something bad happened to them, and it's always Volani. So at the beginning of the story, Volani has vanished, and at the hands of another empire called Arago. The specifics of how that happened is unique to each setting. So that's the other thing. There is these 12 empires which pop up in every single setting. The third one is going to be in the narrative. The narrative is part of this experience, but it is a separate entity. It's not like your players are playing the characters in the narrative. They are separate from everything else. That is what I really wanted to play with. The narrative is something where when you read the narrative of one game, that narrative references elements of the other games, the narratives in those other games. Characters within those stories are having flashbacks and dreams of themselves in the other 3 timelines. Not to ruin this, not really a big spoiler, but every single narrative on each of the books starts with the end of another narrative. So when you read one, you're technically being spoiled an event that happens after the conclusion of the other book. So Conestoga opens with the scene that takes place after the end of Taurus, and then Taurus begins with a scene that's that takes place after the end of Paradise, and then Conestoga has the scene that takes place after the end of Paradise. Even I get confused sometimes. And then about near the end of the book, somebody has a flashback, which is actually the beginning of another scene. So once again, Taurus has the end of Paradise at the beginning, and the beginning of Conestoga at the end. And then Paradise has the end of Conestoga and the beginning of Taurus, and then Conestoga has the end of Taurus and the beginning of Paradise. And then on top of that, these characters are encountering each other and remembering and some of the relationships are carried through. There's this character that pops up. So the narrative is, I think I have as much passion about the narrative than anything else. So that is that point. And then we bring up point 4, which is monsters. Now, there's one monster that's copy pasted between all 3 books, and that I don't do because I'm being lazy. I'm doing that. There's actually a narrative reason for that. The history of this creature is different, but its stats are the same, and that's meant to be a clue of what's going on between these 3 worlds, what this creature is. It's one single creature. It's not a race. It's not a type. It's one dude. Then there's a threat called virus that's threatening all 3 settings. The virus manifests the same in all 3 universes, but its monster stats are different. So there's 3 different monsters in each one, so 9 total, but they're all the same force called virus, and they're all manifesting in the same way. What is virus? What it's doing is another mystery that will unfold if you manage to read all 3 books. But it is a weird foreign threat to all 3 settings. And finally, the 5th one is a book. There's a book within the setting called the Plex Codex. It gets mentioned in all 3 books. There's a history about where this book has come from, where it has. And this book plays heavily into all 3 narratives, and it's also a magic item that players can encounter. And if you read all 3 narratives, you'll understand more of why this book's important. So that's the 5 connecting threads, but mechanically nothing carries through. There's a lot of Pacific fluff that doesn't carry through as well, obviously. There's a different mix of magic and technology, which I've mentioned. Paradise is 80-20 magic technology. Conestoga is 80-20 technology magic, and Taurus is 50-50. So there's a lot of distinction in that. So, yeah. Next question. Thank you. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. So going back to here, and well, the next question is, of course, is why monochrome? Offering the monochrome edition is basically there to give the 2019 backers an option. If each and every person who backed the Affinity Black and White said, we want the color, get rid of the black and white, I would do the upgrade and not offer the black and white. But I know I'm not going to be able to get 200 people unanimously saying, we will all pay to upgrade. There's going to be people that just say, I just want the black and white. I do not care. If they're mechanically the same, I want the black and white. That's what I paid for. And that's why the monochrome is being offered. If I didn't have to do that, I wouldn't be offering a monochrome. I do prefer the color. It does make things a bit more complicated because I'm basically doing the layouts twice for each game. Even though the illustration will be the same, I still have to move the artwork back and forth. You're still talking dozens of hours of work creating these two versions. I also don't know whether or not the backdrops and backgrounds and some other elements in the color version may be unique, like the actual backgrounds to the book may actually be a bit different. So that may also create issues. But that's the reason. It's nothing. I'm not doing it to offer a cheap alternative to people. It's mainly there to make sure that people in 2019's Kickstarter are still honored. Sometimes I regret putting the Affinity as an unlockable because it does make this current situation. I spent months leading up to this campaign trying to figure out how I was going to do it, and I did bounce around the idea of literally refunding all 200 people's pledges, but I realized how complicated that was going to be, and a lot of people were just like, you know, they don't want that. They want that product. They pay for that product. They don't want a refund. They want that product. So in the end, and there was also the possibility that I was going to launch and release Affinity Black and White on Drive-Thru RPG, honor that system, and then launch the Kickstarter. But that becomes an even more annoying situation because I have to give an upgrade option to all the people who bought that Drive-Thru RPG version. And it was just too much work. So in the end, this became the option, offering the monochrome and the color version. I am hoping nobody buys any of the monochrome version because I think the color version is going to be worthwhile. So that's why monochrome. What do we have here? Monochrome versus color, oddly enough, connected. What are the differences? And the answer is there aren't any. Mechanically, fluff-wise, they should be identical. Every illustration is being duplicated in black and white and color. I'm not going to say the color is not going to look better. It's going to. There's just no way around that. The color is going to look sharper. The color is going to look better. But narratively, mechanically, there won't be any difference. Okay? Will there be color illustrations in the color book that won't be in the black and white? I can't make that promise. There is a possibility there will be illustrations in the color version that won't be in the black and white. I don't want to, if Nick creates an illustration that just cannot work as a black and white image, I'm not going to force his hand to make it in black and white. I don't think that's going to happen, but it might be. So anyway, next one. Hey, don't you already have a Kickstarter? Yes. I generally have issues with companies that run multiple Kickstarters. Obviously, some companies like Simon, they'll run anywhere from 2 to 3 campaigns at a time. And most of the time, it's 7 or 8 months apart. I just launched Naramata 3 months ago, so it hasn't come close to delivering yet. Why am I launching Affinity? Well, the obvious reason is that I am bored. The thing about it wasn't until I started doing these campaigns that I fully realized the situation in some of these campaigns. I mean, you see a board game that gets launched and then they launch another game in 6 months. They're like, why haven't you finished your last game? And then, you know, sometimes they don't answer you. And I can answer the question quite easily. You know, why am I launching this game when a Naramata still hasn't finished? And the answer is, it is. As the guy who's created the rules, who's play tested the rules, everything's done. Nick, who did the artwork for Naramata, he's done. He has no more artwork to do. We have one guy doing the tourist illustrations, which is something that people could back. If we didn't have so many people buying the tourist options, we'd be done. And we'd be in China working on prototyping. But we still have tourist illustrations coming in. And then we have another guy, Noah Aldwin, who's building our box. So until that happens, I got nothing to do. Plus, I spent all of late 2019 and 2020 writing Affinity, which is the next question. So oddly enough, if Affinity launches and we blow through, we see some of the stretch goals, or then by the time we hit July, I won't have anything to do again. Now, that being said, I am absolutely not going to launch a third campaign until Naramata gets delivered. So once Naramata gets delivered, maybe I'll think of doing another campaign later in the fall, or I may just wait till 2022. Like I said, I have 3 other projects I'd like to launch. Obviously, I'm impatient, so I want to get going, but I don't want to, because Affinity is a role-playing game, and Heavenfall and Amethyst and his other project are all role-playing games. I have to make sure that all my writing for Affinity is done, unlike a situation with Naramata where everything else is done. And that brings up the next question: is how much of Affinity is finished? And the answer is, if it funded at this point, it's 100% done. I have an editor and proofreading to do. I pay for that. But my job is done. If we say we blow through half of the stretch goals, I do have more content to add. Not that much. I have a new race. I have some new mechanics. I have some new armor, some new weapons to add, and so forth. One of the stretch goals is a novelization of the narrative, and that I'm looking forward to, because then I get to add another 10 or 20,000 words to the novel and put it out. So there's a few Kickstarter stretch goals that would involve more work. But right now, as you guys can see in the videos where I actually go through the current books build, that a vast majority of the writing is done. Like I said, I was about ready to publish the game back in November, and I decided to sit on it instead, do the Kickstarter, because I felt it could look a lot better. And the last question I have here, as I don't see any more questions listed here, is what inspired Affinity in the first place? Well, it should be straightforward. The idea of these 3 interconnected settings. That what inspired me was a book called Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas got turned into a movie. Cloud Atlas is the story of 5, or is it 6? 5 storylines with the same. Well, the movie, at least, the book actually doesn't do this, but the movie does it, with the idea that you have the same actors playing similar roles in 5 different timelines. It goes all the way back to like the 18th century and moves all the way up to the far, far future. So 2 of them are in the past, 1's in the present, and 2 are in the future. And in the novel, it's a nested story. So the story goes, the first halves of 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 is told in entirety, and then it's 4, 3, 2, 1. Maybe it is 6. I can't remember. And in the movie, they edited them so that it's all one single timeline. And there is very few moments where characters seemingly are influenced or affected by the other timelines. Most of the time, it's through weird little almost Easter eggs. I liked that idea, and I wanted to build on it, but I wanted it to be parallel realities instead of different timelines, which is what Affinity is. It deals with parallel realities. And I like the idea of parallel realities being encountering the same threat. And what this threat is and how these universes play into each other, that's kind of the mystery, which is something that story happens. Now, that brings up another movie from even further back called The Fountain. The Fountain is a much more surrealistic, artistic sci-fi film. It's quite a bit older. I think it's 10, 15, maybe 15 years. Rachel Weisz and Hugh Jackman are in it. And it's 3 timelines also. Distant future, past, and present. You're not 100% sure how they really relate to each other until the end, where there's seemingly some some connection, but it's very ethereal and vague. And the movie ends and you're not 100% sure what actually happens. One interpretation is that the central story is the only one that's real. The past story is a book that one character is writing, and the future story is the conclusion of that book written by somebody else. That's a really good interpretation. There are a few other interpretations. One is that backstory also is fictional, but the four stories are. And then some people who say all three stories are real. But that was part of this, of that idea, that you're left to kind of interpret what's going on. I like that as well, and I wanted to play on that, and that's why there is a puzzle. Right? There isn't really a puzzle in Cloud Atlas other than that tinge of familiarity between these stories. I wanted there to be a puzzle within Affinity, a puzzle where people, when you read it, you look at someone and go, oh, that's interesting. I read that in this book. And I want people to read the game, the narrative and in the mechanics, and go, oh, yeah, I see that now. And I want there to be people who potentially look and go, oh, I know exactly what's going on. This is what's happening within these three settings. And I've been offered from some friends to expand outside of the three books and create other media that ties into the Affinity storyline. Ones where you might have to do some searching outside of these three books to get even more data to fill in your gaps. And we'll see. We'll see how the campaign goes. If it goes well, maybe we will entertain that idea. But the point is that it's meant to be a narrative experience. And that was the inspiration. Now, obviously, when you look at Cloud Atlas and you look at Fountain and you look at Affinity, the only thing that they seem similar is the fact that we have three concurrent seemingly timelines. And I guess other than that, it's an anthology. So it's a pretty broad inspiration, but I still like the idea of these settings. And as I wrote them, it was annoying to me. I wrote Paradise and go, okay, Paradise is done. Full stop. It's completely done. Don't worry about it. And then I wrote Taurus and go, or I wrote Conestoga and I went, nope, I'm going to have to go back and change things. So I went back and changed a few things because I wrote an idea. And since I wrote this idea in Conestoga, I had to bring that idea into Paradise. So I went, okay, go back to Paradise, wrote that, went back to Conestoga, finished it. Okay, now they're done. Put those two books aside. Start writing Taurus and go, oh, that's a really good idea. I should do that. Go to Conestoga, implement, go to Paradise, implement. So if someone says, oh, you wrote these three books as a shortcut so you didn't have to write absolutely original settings, it's the other way around. It was more difficult to write these. If I wrote them as completely separate settings, it would have been easier than challenging myself to make them related. That made the project more difficult because if I didn't have to, I wouldn't have to go back and go, I want to add more stuff to make these settings more thematically related. I think personally that there could be some value in some kind of media, whether it be a movie, a TV show, or a cartoon. Obviously, I'm not to that point yet. I mean, obviously, people know I've worked on films and I've written screenplays, and one of them is getting turned into a short film. But Affinity, obviously, on its basic, is very expensive looking. So it would be neat, but it'd be one of those cool things. That being said, one stretch goal is an audiobook. It's after I write the novel. So if the novel gets unlocked, then I get to write this narrative, and then John Fink, who did the narration, he'll be tapped to do an actual audiobook. So hopefully, you never know, we may get to that. So that's it. That's all I had for my questions. We're approaching the 1 hour point, so we're reaching that end. So if anyone has any final questions, post them and I will address them. But yeah, this is the project. It's launching March 30th. It's going to last for 30 days. You can click on these links and you can say, remind me. I can't remind myself, but you can hit that and you'll be pinged the moment the project launches. And I'm hoping it does well. I'm hoping that we blow through as many stretch goals as possible in order to make the game as good as it could be. Plus, it allows me to do this full time, which is the one thing I appreciate the most. The one thing I love about my support base, for my backers, my customers, the people who follow me, all the way back from the original 2008 Amethyst, is that you've supported me to the point where I can now do this full time. I've been an unemployed bum doing this since the beginning of 2019. I left a job that was actually timed to end exactly in early January, and then I went through that. COVID obviously messed things up, but I'm still in Naramata. Once again, pushed that end goal where I can, as long as I can push that end goal where I have to return back to, a white collar job, I can keep pushing that back, the better. Obviously, I would love a project to explode. So suddenly I'm like, okay, I'm comfortable. Maybe I don't have to live in a basement suite, but I do. Maybe we can, but we don't know. And that's why I love my backers. I love my supporters. I love the people who post and comment. You're all fantastic. And I love the fact that I have very few haters, very few haters. My past hasn't been perfect. There's been rough spots, but I've always been appreciative of everyone's support. So VTT integration. I know that Ultra Modern is being integrated into VTT. I know it's done on a volunteer basis, and apparently it's working. The problem is, obviously, I don't have the technical savvy. I don't know people that are technically savvy that would do it nearly for free. Fantasy Grounds supports Ultra Modern. They did that on their own, which I really appreciate. And the result, it's something you can buy. And when you buy Ultra Modern on Fantasy Grounds, I get a cut of the profits, which is really nice. D20 Pro supports it as well. That one's a much smaller system, and its sales are much lower. It's about 10 times less than Fantasy Grounds. I have reached out to Roll20 on numerous occasions, and they have not gotten back to me, so I've kind of given up on that front. So if someone says, hey, why aren't you in Roll20? I'd say, why didn't you ask them? Because I am trying, and they're not answering me. VTT is very big, very popular. I know Ultra Modern 5 is either going to be on there or is on there now. And if I'm able to continue supporting them, if somebody wants to do that, I don't care. Put it on there. I don't care about not getting money. I want these projects on these digital fronts as much as possible. I just don't have the capacity of doing the hard work myself. I just don't. I remember when somebody wanted me to put Ultra Modern into that Wolfram. No, not the Wolfram. That Wolf construction system where you could build armies from 40K and so forth, and then later you could make characters. This was back in 4th edition. I said, sure, that's fantastic. And they're like, you got to do all the work. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I tried. I looked at it and said, like, no, this is way too much work, and it's way too technically complicated. I'm too abstract and too artistically aloof to focus that way. That's what someone who's a bookkeeper or technical minded person can do, which is why I married her. We also, as a person with major visual disability, I love that a stretch goal of the narrative novelization being turned into an audiobook is super awesome. I love the fact that I actually have not one, but several friends that are professional audio people. John Fink has got a fantastic voice. He does the narration for the opening. He also does the narration for he does a narration for one of these 3 narrative glimpses. There's 3 narrative glimpses here. Conestoga, Paradise, and Taurus. Taurus is done by Leah. Paradise is done by Nigel. Nigel, who's maybe still watching. And then Conestoga is done by John. And John's got an amazing voice. And I'm really hoping that he wants to do more work like this. And I would love to pay him to do an audiobook. I'd love for him to do Amethyst as well, because Amethyst does exist as an audiobook. There's does exist as a book. In fact, there's 2 books of Amethyst novelizations that are out already. And I would love it to be an audio version. That's easy. I just give him the book and he does it. To do an audiobook of Affinity involves me being able to expand it, because all the narrative stuff together is about 35 to 40,000 words. I wanted to get to at least 70 or 80,000 before I want to turn it into a book. So there's a lot of additional writing for me to play into. So I'd want to do that first. and then I would take it to John and have him do it. I'm also friends with Mark Meir. Mark Mears is obviously a very well-known voice actor. He's done actual acting. I just saw him in a film actually just recently. But he's best well known for his voice work on some video games, most notably as Commander Shepard. And I've often said I don't deserve his friendship because he is such a wonderful human being. He's a gamer. He's a hardcore fantasy guy, and he did the narration for Ultramodern. And like I said, I didn't approach him for this project for many reasons, but most of it because I didn't want to take advantage of his generosity. Yeah, I'd love to do more audio-based work. And like I said, that's why I like to do as many of these videos as possible instead of having people having to read the campaign. So almost everything in the campaign exists as an audio format in something. I mean, you can see it within the videos, the playthroughs, the full walkthroughs. So there's always something there. I'm a visual person myself, so but I love music. I mean, one of the things for Amethyst that we had was a soundtrack. I mean, the resulting soundtrack, it wasn't bad. It was good. It wasn't exactly where I was going, but it also took way too long. It took 3 years to produce it. I almost gave up. I would love to be able to play with the idea of actually having soundtracks. I would try to hunt down people that I felt were really talented and had passion for the project. And if I could, maybe I would do a soundtrack for Affinity. I would love to do another soundtrack for Amethyst, but maybe it comes to if I do Heavenfall, or if I do Heavenfall, I would absolutely I would insist on trying to do a soundtrack for that. But yeah, I love audiovisual elements like that. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So we will kind of conclude that Q&A. We are 2 weeks from launching this game. So far, responses have been fantastic. I do invite people to share the campaign, to pass it on social media. I do have an advertising budget. It's tapped out, and I'm trying my best to make sure everyone knows. Because the more this campaign raises, the better it's going to be. That's how Kickstarter works. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a company of one. I have a couple people who I freelance. But this is I'm what Kickstarter is supposed to be for. It's not supposed to be for gigantic conglomerates that don't need money and use Kickstarter as a pre-order service. It should be for people like me and other artists that I back. Most of the artists I back on Kickstarter are people that I truly believe the game wouldn't exist if the campaign didn't have my money. And there are a couple exceptions because some of these games are really cool. But yeah, I know so many people in Kickstarter back sure things, and they don't back it until it funds. The funding goal here is very, very low because, like I said, the black and white version is going to exist regardless. But I would, obviously, if it just gets to 5,000 or 6,000 and just ends, it's not going to be as good as if it manages to get all the stretch goals. So that's it from me. I will end it there. Have you guys a fantastic week. Stay safe. Mask up. Get your vaccine. I don't believe it's a political thing to say that. Get your vaccine. Be healthy, because if you're healthy, you can support me more. All right, guys, take care.